I'm joining you today from the mountains of Western North Carolina, Cherokee Land, an incredibly fertile green place, and also a place where on this day, the sky is thick with fire air from Quebec, over 1,200 miles away, just reminding us of this field of interdependence. And I'm looking around here just to see who's here and feel so touched to see some beloveds who I know well and to see many of you that are brand new to me. So welcome everyone. As we get started today, I'll share that the format might be a little different than you're used to. I'll share a short practice and offer reflections and then perhaps a little more practice before we move into a space of reflections and questions. And for me, really the opportunity to interact, which is a practice of surrender itself, as I'll talk about, to relational presence, is one of the most golden opportunities of this kind of gathering. So let's begin by just inviting everyone to close the eyes and to take in 3 of the deepest and slowest breaths you've taken today. Just inviting your breath to relax you, allowing yourself to turn the attention within and to begin to slow down and settle. Feeling your connection with gravity, the field of spiritual support continually beneath us, calling us down into our bodies, down into our connection with the earth in every moment of our life. And just inviting, if you will, a softening, relaxing any places you might be holding tension, and letting go of anything that is not original to this moment. I'd like to take a moment to just presence where we are on this day in the unfolding of time, approaching summer solstice. Maybe each of you can take a moment to just through your senses become more aware of the presence of summer arriving and how you feel that in the place you are. Here in the United States, today is Father's Day, and so I feel a tenderness in my heart always on this day. My dad was my first spiritual teacher, and I always feel tenderness when I connect with him on this day, and to appreciate those of you who are dads, and how about those of you who are parents? Today is also significant here in the United States. Tomorrow is Juneteenth, and this is a day that commemorates the day in 1865 that the last enslaved peoples were free. And this too is an incredibly potent day of recognition and a very tender field here in the land where I live, okay? So let's maybe start by just acknowledging the field of interconnection, and remembering that everything in our practice, everything, is something that we're engaging in for our collective, on behalf of our collective, and leaning into the support of our collective. This includes our ancestors. This includes recognition of the DNA, the epigenetics that allows us to recognize that our healing is on behalf of all peoples throughout deep time. And to expand that in a more honest way, all beings across time and space. So with those acknowledgements, I'd like to start our exploration of the power of surrender by just emphasizing that I'm not here to give a presentation today, that I'm here, like all of you, to soften into the practice of surrender, to meet with beginner's mind, this fleeting moment in time, this unique, never has occurred before and never will again, gathering of humans circling together for practice. My job as a teacher is to facilitate presence on this day, to facilitate surrender, and facilitate means to make easier. So just know that I'm showing up open and empty, inviting all of you to soften, open, empty, so we can move into an honest and radical exploration of surrender. So I invite you for the next few minutes to close the eyes if they were open in the time I was sharing, and to engage in a short practice of conscious allowing and doing nothing. So not trying to meditate, not focusing on sensation or breath, aware of breath breathing you, not becoming the breather. Just relaxing, if you will, into doing nothing. Consciously allowing life to be as it is. Consciously allowing yourself to be as you are. Nothing to do, fix, or change. Nothing to solve, nothing to strive for. Just let your mind be as it is. Let the body be as it is. If you notice effort, give yourself permission to soften effort. And just notice on this day when invited to do nothing but rest, but be. Does it feel easy, natural? Is there resistance? And can you consciously allow the resistance to be? If you notice resistance, in what forms is that coming through? And let's all now take in a deep, full body breath together. And release. As I move into sharing a teaching, I'd be curious if we were in person in circle to ask how many of you settled quite naturally into consciously allowing life to be, and how many of you noticed some resistance, and how many of you notice it as a very alive daily practice. The place I want to touch first, and today I'll talk about 5 different expressions of surrender and what I mean by the power of surrender. But the place I want to touch first is an invitation for nuance, a recognition that it can be easy to perceive even the word surrender from binary perception, from duality. So if Eden's talking about surrender today, then that must point to a kind of inaction, a kind of resignation, a kind of not having, a kind of defeat. Sometimes when we're in binary perception, we go to opposites. And what I want to invite us instead is a dharmic conversation, which requires us to sense and feel our way into the nuances and the multidimensionality of surrender. So an important teaching for me on this topic came not from a meditation teacher, but a movement meditation teacher, an Aikido teacher, who taught me something that has woven through my Dharma practice ever since profoundly, and that is the balance in practice between conscious allowing and conscious protection. In other words, in meditation, we use the metaphor often of the open hand on one side, the hand of receptivity, just letting the moment be as it is, letting ourselves become, through surrender, open to life as it is unfurling moment by moment. Thus, a form of partnership with life, not living in adversarial relationship. The open hand that welcomes what is. And if you can connect right now with what it is you, within your own experience, are welcoming today. I'm navigating a physical injury, so I'm welcoming and being with some really difficult sensations. And I'm welcoming and being with the nuances of the field inside this space and outside on this dynamic summer day. On the other hand, is conscious protection. We talk about this sometimes as Manjushri sword, which cuts through delusion. And these things do go hand in hand. Think of conscious protection just in the form of the energy it takes to show up for meditation practice, or the heart-based instruction to drop it when a thought that we know, because we've been paying attention, isn't serving us, is starting to take our attention. Or in the relational field, perhaps, conscious protection needed to provide ample space around our deepening practice. I hope this resonates with people, this balance between the surrender, conscious allowing life to be exactly as it is, and conscious protection. I start with that just to remind us that it's not an either or. And because teachings can get misconstrued sometimes, rather, by conditioning, I wanted us to connect with that awareness first, okay? And as we move into exploring different domains of surrender, let's consider first the really simple surrender of thought that we're invited to as soon as we come to establish practice. Simple but not always easy, we could say, but that we're invited to shift from a shallow listening to a deep, emergent listening. When I surrender to the moment, listening to life as it unfolds, I'm listening from a deeper place as opposed to the shallow surface or superficial thoughts that, I don't know about you, but before I had a practice, I often believed was me. And I often believed I didn't have a choice around. Before I continue, I'll just share that each domain I'll talk about right now points ultimately to surrendering the illusion of separate self. And these are all aspects that I find very important in a practice in surrendering the illusion of separate self. So just consider in your own practice the domain of thought and how we come to recognize the fluidity. Oh, these thought formations are not necessarily something I have to believe. There's space between and around and through all of my thoughts. Who I actually am is the awareness from which thought arises and passes, but not the thoughts. They are not my identity. And for me in practice, that was one of the first places of freedom. Again, simple but not always easy, but the recognition that we can bring curiosity to what is the quality of thinking mind, where is this particular thought taking me, and who is the I, who is the part of me believing this kind of story, this particular narrative. Instead, letting us kind of move into the space between the stories, yeah? How about, friends, surrendering identification with emotion? Surrendering identification with emotion. This doesn't in any way, shape, or form mean disassociation. I consider our emotions sacred messengers, energy in motion. And there's a useful place in practice when we become more skillful at practicing with emotions. Again, recognizing, where do I feel in my body this energy? What are the thought forms connected with this energy? And what is perhaps the need unmet? So we learn to bring compassion to emotional states of being. But a deeper freedom comes when we recognize that everything is energy, and we can simply allow ourselves to stay resting in awareness and consciously allow, going back to that phrase again, this feeling too to be here, this feeling too to be here. One reason that I'm talking about the power of surrender today, it has honestly been the core teaching in my life and in my practice again and again and again that I'm asked to revisit. But today and in this season, I've been asked to navigate the aggressive re-arising of an old injury in a way that's really, really difficult, really uncomfortable physically, and positions me in a place of complete lack of control or knowing. Of course, some of you know well, this is a freeing place in practice, but it doesn't mean that when the summer began and I recognized the reality, the sobering reality, that my body was not able to work for me, or, you know, friends, I find myself struggling to find a word other than perform. But that's the word condition mind would use. My body's not performing well, or that there's so much pain in certain actions that I'm used to doing with ease and grace. There was a panic. And when we are asked to let go, you can touch this for your own self, we tend to go into, rather, the ego tends to go into fear. False evidence appearing real. And so how can we grab onto a story or a narrative, something that seems solid? How can we grab onto a thought or emotion, the first two domains of surrender, to try to find something solid amidst this groundless place? And if we're honest, there are so many ways that we try to control life, and yet we are always existing in groundlessness. So the gift for me personally this summer has been, I know the blessing of this. I know the invitation to drop it, to put ego's resistance down, to be willing to question the fears that say, but what if? What if I can't carry what my responsibilities are this summer or this year? I know to set down the part who perceives that I'm alone. And in that trust and that surrendering to, this is what's happening. And each day is a sort of somatically informed evolution where the body is showing me what it is capable of and what it is not. And if anyone has a long to-do list like I do, you can imagine that's quite a practice. But I know, because I'm clear of who and what I am and who and what I am not is the separate self, that it is my path to soften into this with love, to take it one breath at a time, one day at a time, and to trust even in the name of fear. Yeah. So I want to share a little parable that some of you might be familiar with, and I just find it a continually useful one. This is a parable of the farmer, and the story is that once upon a time there was a farmer who lived on a farm with his son and his horse. One day the barn door was left open and the horse ran away. And when the nearby villagers heard about it, they ran to the farm to tell the farmer how sorry they felt for him. "How will you work your farm without your horse?" they asked. And the farmer simply shrugged and said, "Good, bad, who's to say?" A few days later, the farmer's horse was returned, and following it were two more horses. The villagers were so excited for the farmer's luck, they ran to his farm and told him so. And again, the farmer simply shrugged and said to the villagers, "Good, bad, who's to say?" The new horses were not broken in. So the farmer's son worked hard to break them in so they could be used on the farm. And while doing so, one of the new horses threw him off and his leg was broken. The villagers again ran to the farm and expressed their deep sadness about the son's broken leg. Now your son can't help you on the farm. And one more time, the farmer asserted and affirmed. Good, bad, who's to say? As the son was healing from the broken leg, a war broke out in the countryside. All the young men were sent to fight. Many died or were seriously injured. However, since the farmer's son had a broken leg, he was not able to go. The villagers again came to the farm to say how very lucky he was. And once again, the farmer just shrugged his shoulders and he said, good, bad, who is to say? So I find great solace in that story because it helps me to touch in on the quality of true nature we can call compassionate neutrality, compassionate welcome. And this is also the quality of conscious allowing. Remember, conscious allowing, which is a surrender, alongside conscious protection. And conscious protection has not a thing to do with egoic defense. But it means, for instance, as I'm navigating what feels like a physical crisis this summer, I can rest with meeting what is emerging from a kind, curious, open, spacious place. That for me is what love is. It means meeting all of life with love, while at the same time taking whatever actions feel wise when I'm listening to the guidance of the body-mind. Perhaps in this case, having some support from an osteopath and making wise choices, okay? But if everyone could just connect in your own way with what is a form in which life is asking you to, inviting you to deepen your embodiment of conscious allowing, of surrender. And just notice what comes up for you. The next domain that I want to speak to is the domain of surrendering doing, surrendering filling and striving. This is a place where I feel it's very useful to consider all of the forms through which we might habitually fill. Assessing, judging, comparing, measuring, standing outside of life, looking in, subject, object. This is part of the domain of filling. Meditation is a practice and path of emptying. We might fill in the more explicit ways of keeping busy or being on our iPhones a little too much, or being glued to thinking mind. Sometimes noticing the thinking mind as center of gravity before we sink down into a deeper embodiment in practice. And I think one of the reasons surrendering our habit of filling is so important, and certainly so important to me, is that, as I touched in the very beginning, just reminding us that we are practicing for love of our collective, that we are practicing for our collective and leaning into the support of our collective rather than as an individual solo pursuit. there's an awareness of how much the momentum of doing and filling and striving has woven through, and I suggest scarred, the human experience for a very, very long time in history. We could pause and just touch and presence in our hearts the imprints internally of colonialism, capitalism, patriarchy, and a great disconnect from the natural world, that which has occurred to create a particular paradigm where we are, as a teacher of mine used to say, running really, really fast, but in the wrong direction. Running really fast, but in the wrong direction. So that for some of us, even when we come to practice, so craving and hungry for a deeper peace, we start doing practice, turning practice into another form of need to get somewhere other than here, even though it's counterintuitive. We need to battle the forces of dark to get to the light, need to transcend what's right here and now in the kind of discomfort and multidimensionality and complexity of being human and alive and in the moment. And in this generous, generous practice, we're invited, and our practice will guide us in, as many of you know well, to just keep surrendering, to just keep letting go, setting down striving, setting down this attempt to fill space, starting to become less afraid of the darkness, until we recognize that the emptiness we were pushing away or trying to get away from is the fertile emptiness we were longing for the entire time. It's just the ground of belonging. So we surrender the separate self. We surrender our personal habits of separate self, the assertion and assumption, the myth, the trance of separation. And we get to come home to the already existing quiet, the always here interconnection that never ever leaves us. We only leave it. The radical inclusivity of awareness that leaves nothing out, welcomes, consciously allows everything, meets everything, all energy, all life, with this conscious allowing, this welcome I'm pointing to. There's a quote by Ajahn Chah that I find very useful. He says, "If you let go a little, you'll find a little happiness. If you let go a lot, you'll find a lot of happiness. And if you let go absolutely, you will be free." And yet we know it's not always easy. Sometimes there's resistance. A quote I'd like to share by T.S. Eliot, and you might want to close your eyes as you take this in, and just notice how it touches you. "I said to my soul, be still and wait without hope. For hope would be hope for the wrong thing. I said to my soul, be still and wait without hope. For hope would be hope for the wrong thing. And he continues, wait without love, for love would be love of the wrong thing. There is yet faith, but the faith and the love and the hope are all in the waiting. Wait without thought, for you are not ready for thought. And lastly, he says, so the darkness shall be the light, and the stillness the dancing. Just invite us to consider on a personal level what that waiting without hope as a spiritual invitation means for you. In an age when we are facing such extreme global uncertainty, so many unknowns, my husband and I reflect often on the space that we need in our human experience just to feel all of the feelings that move through us as part of the natural feedback system of planet Earth, of this collective of discomfort and vulnerability with all that we are navigating together. And yet, in waiting without hope, without trying to fill the space, without having a conclusion to cling to, without having a thought or story or narrative to put life into a box, we open our hearts to life. We open our hearts to saying, I can be here with all of this in this kind of openness that proves my non-separation, this quality of love that proves my belonging. Yeah. And so it's tender and vulnerable and freeing all at the same time. There are just two domains I want to touch before we move into some more meditation and then open it up. And one is surrendering our grasping to know, surrendering knowing. Again, this is very nuanced because in dropping into the mind of not knowing, and really I encourage making it a practice to rest in not knowing and to find our home in groundlessness, okay? Which doesn't mean to spiritual bypass, which doesn't mean to bypass what is happening in life. It just means to make home in the ever-changing reality of things. There's a way in which we access a much, much deeper, I want to say primordial knowing, relational knowing, the knowing of in the moment, direct experience, direct revelation, the knowing that comes from perceiving through relational presence, a larger intelligence, the field of Earth's consciousness and yourself as that, not a part of it, as it. You are an expression of it. And I think this one touches me so much, surrendering, knowing. Maybe one, because in my own practice, this is a place I kicked and screamed a lot in my younger years, a place I resisted. But I want to know. I want to know where this path is taking me. I want to know. Even when I shaved my head, let go of all my belongings, stepped out of the system of the economy and became a Buddhist monastic, there was still a I want to know, and there was still a I want to strive, a sense of being the solo heroic spiritual warrior who's going to get to some place I deemed enlightenment from this, rather than realizing that we practice to remember the already awakened state, not to get somewhere and not to know something up here, but to, by letting go of that entirely, by letting go of the system internally that labels, assesses, judges, perceives life through subject, object, sees through hierarchical perception, higher, lower, good, bad, want this, don't want this. Sounds like a lot to let go of. And yet, many of you know well, each time we let go is coming home. Each time we surrender is freedom of the heart. Recognition, oh gosh, I didn't need to be giving all of my energy to that striving and ego maintenance and trying to stay this I in a particular form. I could let go and let life guide me and let life move through me and let life be experienced through seeing with the heart rather than the binary perception lens. Yeah. As I navigate this injury and some of the, it's vulnerable. It feels very, there is a lot of vulnerability right now because I carry so much in life, and my capacity has become suddenly so much less. But I draw a lot of courage and faith from an experience I had years ago of navigating Lyme from a tick bite, a bite I received while I was a monastic. And Lyme was my greatest Dharma teacher in this lifetime, by far. The bite of the arachnid invited me to see clearly what I was not yet willing to surrender, what I was out of fear holding tightly to as who I thought I was. Had to have this level of energy and this level of performance and this kind of physical experience that I considered familiar or comfortable. And Lyme said, nope, we're taking it all away, the whole thing. And in fact, you're not going to know on any given day what energetic or physical or mental form you're going to be in. And guess what? That ended up being incredibly empowering, because it helped me to recognize the reality with which I could accept through this conscious allowing, which is the nature of the heart, to welcome all energy, all of life with love, that everything that moved through me, that arose in me, was part of the sacred, that nothing was separate, that I could learn to trust a deeper inner compass than the kind of script I had had for my life and my health and my age and whatever it was supposed to be. I just want to encourage us all as much as possible to let our practice be an opportunity to let go of the script, to become much, much more aware of the scripts you've inherited, the stories you've inherited about who you are supposed to be and what forms your expression are supposed to take, and to let surrender invite you into a deeper power. So ultimately, we surrender to knowing the larger intelligence that binds all of us together in a unified field alongside all of our differences. The power of surrender points to a power that's innate, that's always here, that already exists, rather than a power we need to get or cultivate even, or attain through some external or some form of achievement or development. It's the fertile emptiness, the luminous darkness, to presence my most recent book. And when I consider the word power, I like to define power, authentic power, which means shared power rather than power over, as our innate ability to give and receive love moment by moment. This means to dwell in relational presence, or we could say interbeing, or we consciousness, but to dwell in, to exist, to live this short, precious life in the field of knowing who we are, not separate. And it does require surrendering our thoughts. over and over, surrendering our sense that we are our thoughts, remembering our spiritual sovereignty. You have a choice in every moment of your life. Spiritual sovereignty, surrendering our unhealthful relationship to emotions. And so we can cultivate a compassionate relationship to energy in motion, so that we can trust that energy arises and passes. You know, each emotion, studies show, only exists for 90 seconds, but we keep, by giving our attention to it, feeding, replay. So an emotion can go on for hours or days. And then just to name the other expressions of surrender once more: surrendering the illusion of control. There's much more I could say about this, so maybe we'll touch it in the discussion, but I write a lot in Luminous Darkness about surrendering control and being deeply compassionate with ourselves as we do this. Surrendering the doing and filling habits. And what do we get then? Essential restoration. The essential restoration of the night that so many people are not getting, even when they go to sleep at night, because this habit has become so widespread of doing and filling. And ultimately surrendering our sense of knowing, to rest in the not knowing that is cultural humility. Next week I'll guide a Eco-Dharma retreat, and we will spend a lot of time communing with trees and with the more than human world, from the not knowing, not labeling, that allows us to have genuine communion, to let the tree reveal itself rather than imposing our ideas, right? We love doing that, or the ego does, rather. I want to end these reflections and then invite people into quiet before I open up the space with a Suzuki Roshi quote that I love. And Suzuki Roshi is the teacher who brought Soto Zen from Japan to the United States. And this quote came to me when I was writing about the luminous darkness. The subtitle of the book is about embracing the unknown. Okay? When you bow, bow. Sit, sit. When on a dark night, surrender to the journey of the soul. Take the fetal position. That's it. Take the fetal position. And I end with that quote because we are experiencing a dark night. If we're on the spiritual path, part of the journey is the dark night. The dark night simply pointing to navigating the unknown, learning how to be with, open in this moment to the mystery itself. Letting go so you can know yourself as held by the mystery. Collectively, we are in a dark night. We're navigating global uncertainty. It isn't helpful, and it can cause great harm the more we go into stories to try to label and cling to narrative to fill the space. But I believe deeply that if we can be vulnerable and soft enough together to listen deeply to the empty space, to move in a more tender, receptive, open way through all that is emerging and also being stirred in us, we have access to a much greater shared intelligence, okay, as we navigate our difficulties. Shall we close our eyes for a few minutes? Bring awareness, if you will, to your physical posture. And as you either close the eyes or rest them open in a soft gaze, just notice the experience of resting in darkened stillness. Darkness being the fertile field of restoration, the greatest teacher of surrender, inviting us to set down the mind that perceives difference and categorizes and seeks to come to conclusion, and simply gifting us with the space to be with what is, as it is. As you sit, be aware of your relationship with gravity. Allow the breath to breathe you. And again, please give yourself permission to do nothing, manage nothing. Just be. You can be aware of what's moving through you. And please be aware of awareness itself, the field, the consciousness through which everything arises and returns. The darkness from which all light arises and returns. Aware of all that is changing. And simultaneously the unchanging nature of awareness. nothing to do or make happen, nothing to strive for, and nowhere to get to. What is the posture, the somatic experience of surrendering to the now? And just notice how the body, mind, how the breath might guide you in letting go even more fully into the support of the ground, the earth below. Into the spaciousness of 360 degrees awareness. The invitation to let go of all that is not original to this moment. What is the posture of surrender? What is the somatic experience of surrender? And just notice as you inquire if there is perhaps greater softening someplace where you are holding, deeper opening to the aliveness of this moment. And I invite you to just invite the breath to deepen now. It's really feeling the rhythm of breath, the massage of breath from within. And if you'd like to, you can rest a hand on your heart or belly and just notice how this addition of touch might impact the inquiry I've given you. What is the posture of surrender? Can we surrender moment by moment to being held? Is it not this that strengthens our capacity to hold one another, to hold life with care and generosity, being held and holding, remembering the in this together nature of existence? If you'd like to, you are welcome to bring in your own compassionate voice, to offer yourself any expression of reassurance, of genuine kindness that feels true to this moment. Never underestimate the importance of a self-compassion practice. The word self not pointing to small self in this nature, but world as self through the portal of your own being. And perhaps compassion can express as simply as, I'm right here with you. I love you. Keep going. So let's take in one more deep breath together. Inhaling down into the belly and releasing. Okay. So I would love to open up the space now for reflections and questions, for conversation, Dharma conversation, one of my favorite ways to spend time. And so I'll simply ask you, what feels alive about this topic today? What has been stirred? What do you feel curious about, or what insights do you want to share? I want to invite even those of you who might feel timid bringing voice into Zoom to show up to this, to speak from your heart. This is an incredibly potent and powerful use of our time together. Yeah. Resting in relational presence and seeing what arises together. So my understanding is, as Marnie shared, you can raise a hand if you want to come on the screen. You could also post a reflection or question. But the invitation is here.
Eden, there are two things in the chat, and I can read them to you if that's helpful.
Thank you. It is. I find it in teaching sometimes distracting to read the chat at the same time, but I love you reading it to me. So thank you.
The first one's by Lori, and she asks, what about an instance where it's important for me to stand up for myself? Where does surrender and letting go fit into this?
Thank you, Lori. This is such an important question. And this is why I began the teaching kind of emphasizing the nuance rather than binary way to perceive surrender. When I offered the teaching of conscious allowing, the open hand on one side, and conscious protection on the other side, this is exactly what I'm talking about. We need both. We sometimes point to it even as simply in practice as strong back, open heart, right? Soft heart. But one of the ways this plays out in the relational field is in any relational situation, in any conversation, in any relationship dynamic, I always feel that it's most useful to start from the place of deep listening. Am I listening deeply within to this being and to whomever I'm with? There's a little bit of sound in the background. I wonder if we could find a way to quiet. I don't know if others can hear it, but I can. And so we want to begin by, in other words, deep listening is always the portal to interconnection and to conscious response, to making wise choices in the relational field. But deep listening is a practice of the open hand, of surrender, because it means, am I willing to listen in a way that is not extractive listening, that is not transactional listening, that is not listening to my own projections, but not what's actually happening? Am I willing to listen deeply? And when we do that, we gather a lot of useful information. And we also equally are listening within to our own heart and being. And this is where what I call seeing with the heart, clarity can arise in terms of, is this a situation? I don't know what the specifics are of this dynamic, but is this a situation where I need to continue to listen or to inquire more deeply that will lead me to compassion? Or is this a situation where a boundary needs to be drawn? A situation where something needs to be said, stated, requested, boundary drawn? And each, the open hand and Manjushri sword, are expressions of compassion. Gentle compassion, fierce compassion. Surrender and conscious protection go hand in hand. But we have to have access to the conscious discernment to know when to use this. Are people with me so far? Can I see some nods if you know what I'm pointing to? So it can be easy to be listening in a situation, but I'm not really listening. I'm defended. I'm listening with an agenda. That's what I call extractive listening. It's just not deep. If I'm really listening, that means it has an outward direction and an inward direction too. I will be informed. I will be informed if something is a basic inquiry, folks, in practice. Is this thought or action leading toward compassion or away from compassion? Guess what? If it's leading away from compassion, you drop it. I spoke with someone just the other day who's in the process of going through a really painful divorce, a divorce in which they were completely caught off guard and surprised by infidelity in a way that's really put them through a dark night of the soul. And the other party, the other person, was really wanting them to be continually in relationship, even though they're not married anymore. And this person, through their own inquiry and deep listening, got to see, oh, the quote unquote nice one was going along saying yes to that because it seemed like the nice, right thing to do when we've been together so long. But through deep listening, I got to recognize that is tearing me apart. And that's actually not kind to either of us right now. So then she could say, conscious protection for a period of the next number of months, no contact, please, while I do my own healing. I offer this with love. Can people see the sensibility of that and the loving nature of that as well? Yeah, yeah. So that's one example. And if the person who asked that question wanted to get any more specific, you're welcome to. But tell me, Marnie, what else?
Actually, I was going to invite a few people
Uh-huh.
to come on because some of the
Let's do it.
questions are long and nuanced. There's a lot more that people are curious about you saying on the protection piece. Conscious protection, when the same issues reappear in different forms, and other people piped in yes, yes on conscious protection. So I'm not sure what's there, and maybe that just got addressed in your response because I also saw some love coming at you when you were responding to that.
Mm-hmm.
But also, Andre, there's a beautiful inquiry here. If you wouldn't mind coming on screen, I won't do your question justice by just reading it.
Come on the screen if you might, Andre. And just so people know, in my second book, Relational Mindfulness, as well as in Luminous Darkness, I go more deeply into conscious protection and conscious allowing and give very palpable examples. Okay? Yeah. Andre, do you want to join us?
Yeah, I'm here. Yep.
Great.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, I guess I expressed in my what I wrote in my comment in my that there is some dark times going on at the moment and working through it. And I have been doing other work with people to let go of what I've been told as limiting beliefs, and just doing that and that sort of surrendering to my feelings and letting me feel has brought, like I've sort of always wanted to join these sanghas and have not found the time, and sort of surrendering made me sort of drawn to this one and how powerful it's been. And that I can see that reading your books will also, give me a lot more power, and the whole, surrendering with compassion and surrendering with power and knowing when to use that is such a powerful tool to have. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that insight. And is there a particular question in there, or might I speak to one aspect of that insight that you shared that was so rich?
I have no questions, but I'm happy for you to speak to. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I love what you shared, and also grateful that you could join us today and find the time, right? And, I just want to voice that personally, I came to practice both from my own grief of the loss of my father as a child, and grief for the world as an environmental activist and student in college studying climate crisis, coming from a family of social justice activists deeply in the work of LA Skid Row and racial injustice. My heart was just tormented by the state of our world. I did not have a context for it, for navigating it, the emotions of it, the ways I wanted it to inform me, to show up from a way that felt meaningful, because my love for the world was so deep, but I was so torn up. And I found that this practice really, truly offers us the context we need to, moment by moment, open to, not numb out to, not get heady about, no more talking and thinking, from my perspective, my opinion, if you will, about what's happening. We don't need more conversations that are about opinions, talking and thinking. We need more dharmic conversations, which means coming down to a place of feeling and inquiring and sensing together as we navigate these challenges, so it can be from a place that is from a we consciousness, or what I'm calling relational presence in this together, as opposed to I versus you, and opposed to separate from the natural world. So there's so much I could say about that, but I really appreciate you sharing what you shared, Andre. And even let's talk real briefly about conscious allowing and conscious protection regarding state of the world, folks. Every morning I wake up, my husband and I engage in our practice. We engage with the natural world and the more than human world, and only at a certain time that we have deemed is okay for us do we turn on our devices. And our devices get turned off at 5 p.m. every night. We have that privilege. We don't have children and we do our own work. But we all need different forms of conscious protection from the news, meaning I want to be present when I'm taking it in, not tired. I want to be ready and open to be with it, not unconsciously take it in while double tasking of something else. Are people following? There's so many ways we have to set conscious protection around our practice in a world that is so demanding and activated right now. Time for another question. Who's next? Or reflection?
We'll call on Jane. I'm going to bring you on screen, Jane.
Hi.
Hi, Deborah. Thank you very, very much. It's lovely to see you again. You touched me deeply last time. You touched me deeply this time. I just want to make a very quick comment and then just share something. So my comment is I was faced with my mortality when I was very young. And I have to say, when you talk about when you were faced with Lyme, how that transformed your way of being in many ways, it sounds like. I am with you completely. I not had to, but I was able to let go and surrender and let go of control, no longer be a workaholic, no longer have a list of to-dos, no longer always constantly having to distract myself. And really, it changed my life, and I'm grateful for that. So I just wanted to share that. There's a phrase I use in my practice. I'm a psychotherapist, which is that we if we change the wording from mental illness to mental wellness, the we being the wellness, it's the we that really can make such a huge impact on our lives. The connections, the deep connections of being present. And I thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. And I want to emphasize, in luminous darkness, I draw upon many different wisdom streams. Zen practice being my home base, and the practice of animism and a particular form of European shamanism being core for me as well. In shamanic practice, it is recognized that all healing exists and occurs in community, that we have to be held by community. It occurs not through isolating and isolation, that's more the seed of lack of wellness, but reconnecting. A person will bring as many community members as possible to their healing session, for instance. And so I appreciate that nature right here and now. And I heard that nature in what you shared about wellness and we. Yeah, we really need each other. And so I wrote relational mindfulness to invite people in a very, I feel like, disarming way, because I know it can feel vulnerable, to engage in the relational field more vulnerably and more courageously, because I believe that's one of the core symptoms of the trance of separation is weird habits we've all established, weird social etiquettes, weird expectations of the relational field not being divine and honest and connected. I'm not willing for that. So that's why I wrote relational mindfulness, and I hope people will check it out if that excites you too. Yeah. And I also consider that our Sangha is not just the place that we come to practice and have these conversations with. Our Sangha is the entire world, and we need to be perceiving perhaps our local Sangha as portal to remembering that. But our practice is in the relational field everywhere we go. Every interaction you ever have, every conversation. And surrender is really the first step, because I have to drop some of my thinking mind, my I versus you unconscious associations, my preoccupations, to even be open to the aliveness and sometimes uncomfortability and unknown of the relational field. Okay.
And do it with compassion and with authenticity, I think,
You
are
got it.
two keys. So thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciate what you are saying. It vibrates very near to my heart. So thank you.
And is there another? How are we doing, Marnie, on questions? Or
We have 2 more people with their hands up, so I'm going to
let's
bring on
do it.
Mike now.
Okay.
Hi,
Hi.
thank you, Marlon. Hi, Eden. Thank you for your time with us today. I have a personal question, if possible. I am about to go on a 15-day silent retreat at the end of the week coming. And one of the questions I sort of completed applying for a place at a Gaia House for this was that, what are your intentions during your personal retreat? And I'd written down my intention was to think about anicca, but also potentially concentrate on some metta practice, because it's an area I feel I haven't done very much of. But what my heart tells me really is that these are quite restrictive, and in fact, it may be more healthy and more helpful and wiser to, in effect, to surrender to what arises and work with that. So I just wondered if you could speak to that at all, please.
Sure. I love that you're about to go on personal retreat. I'm so happy for you. And a couple encouragements. First, just on a very practical level, this conscious protection and conscious allowing can play into the schedule you follow and the intentions you set. So surrender can and may it be, okay, your ultimate intention, because through everything you'll be engaging with, showing up and surrendering to the nakedness of the moment as it is going to serve you first and foremost. Are you following? But there's something useful about, perhaps you have, I imagine you might have some schedule there of meditation and time out meditating in nature or just resting. So the structure, for instance, I'm leading a retreat next week and we'll follow a basic meditative structure, but our intention overall will be to let go of the entire domain of filling, right, or controlling, and to surrender completely to the moment, in this context of my retreat, to our oneness with the natural world. I'll offer a short reminder to people that it's not what we do, it's how we do it. So you can be practicing metta, you can be studying anicca, but are you doing so from the ground of being, surrender to the ground of being, from the fully open heart? Or are you doing so from a kind of, this will sound funny because it's not meditative, but sometimes we bring our non-meditative habits to meditation, don't we? Kind of a grasping or striving or another form of doing and filling. Just quickly, how many people, show of hands, have ever used your practice as another form of like filling or doing? I have. Okay, so make surrender the ultimate intention. Perfect. Yeah.
Very wise. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
If we can get one more in, Celeste is here with a
Sure. Hi, Celeste. I can't hear you yet.
Unmute Celeste. Hello, I'm
There you
unmuted.
are.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I hope to go on retreat someday with you. This has been so meaningful to me. A quick question. The conscious allowing and conscious protection, is there a certain hand that you use? What if you're like a dominant right-handed person? Which would it be, the allowing or the protection? Like, should you choose, or
I
any
will put
comments?
that
Thank you.
inquiry to your own personal experience. Let it be a somatic inquiry where you ask, is there a particular hand? There might be, there might not. That feels like it wants to express the absolute receptive aspect of my nature, the yin, the gentle, the just listening aspect of compassion. Is there another hand that feels more natural to express what I described as Manjushri sword, the fierce compassion? I guide the fierce compassion Sangha weekly. And you might have your body give an answer, and you might not. It's actually a question I've never been asked, and I think it's a fun one. I love conversations directly with the body, so you can ask your body and see what the somatic response is. But think of the receptive, the elemental receptive aspect of our nature, which is the elemental darkness and light, sunshine, activity, ferocity, courage. This comes from the other side.
Well, I think my controlling dominant hand, my right side, the one that controls, I think I need to let it allow more for balance. I mean,
Great.
it's my defense. My right hand is my defense for protecting myself. So I think I need to take that feeling and make it allow things more. And maybe
That sounds
does that make
wonderful.
sense?
Sounds
Okay,
wise.
thank you.
And I like to remind people, just as we bring it to a close,
Mhm.
I like to say we want to learn to protect what we love, not defend against what we fear. Protect what we love and all that we love as humans, not defend
Not
against
defend.
what we fear. Can people sense the difference between those two expressions? Gosh, humans spend a lot of time in the defensive posture.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah, that's
So,
my work right there. Thank you.
yeah. Thank you. And
Thanks.
thank you, everyone. It's been really, really lovely being here with you today, evening for some of you. People can visit my website to find ways you might come and sit with me again.
Mhm.
We have opening for next year's Heart of Listening trainings. I think it'll be open tomorrow, which is a 6-month immersion that is very deep. And I just want to say that it was really wonderful, meaningful to be here with you today. So let's just pause and dedicate the merit of our time together, recognizing the honesty and care, the sincerity and kindness and courage within this space. And let's dedicate these energies, these qualities to all beings across time and space. As I stated earlier, the entire collective, seen and unseen, visible and invisible, from the human and more than human realm. Thank you.